I'm at least 100 kilometers from the nearest snowmobile trail or Seoul. Last night it was minus 40. I have no matches and only one energy bar per day.
Winter. It's the perfect paradox. Beauty, silence, and stillness unequaled. Starkness, solitude, and danger unquestioned. So why challenge it? Why question it? Or rather, why question my ability to survive it? Where I come from, surviving bugs, heat, thirst, storms are tough. But surviving the cold goes well beyond a test. In the far north, they call you a greenhorn until you go through the frigid rite of passage. And that test is not surviving the winter. It's freezing an appendage and having the black dead skin to prove it. It's the winter's version of a battle scar. I've been here before, dropped down in the middle of this remote wilderness and left to survive alone. The personal prayers of safety I utter here will be about warmth, about just making it through the night. Warmth during a time of season when forgiveness for mistakes doesn't exist. One wrong decision, one moment of apathy, or lack of vigilance, and this wilderness will not forgive me. It'll remain unmoved by any cries of pain from frostbite, unchangeable by any moans of hypothermic chills. It'll just be what it is, a frigid, deadly landscape, helping only those who help themselves.
I can hear the sound of Trevor's plane just off in the distance now. It's about minus 30. Now what? It's mid to late afternoon. And I don't have the time to get picky, so best bet is to get out of this wind.
In the dead of winter, even the lightest of breezes is enough to chill you down and slowly kill you with hypothermia.
See if I can find a good little shelter here somewhere. There comes a time, well, the time's pretty immediate actually. You've got to make one important decision. Stay or go. Most importantly is just the realization that you have to make that decision. If you stay, you have a chance to build camp, make signal fires, and maybe start hunting. You might have a situation where you're simply waiting for a better chance to travel, like waiting out a storm, or perhaps waiting for freeze up. Or maybe there comes a time when you realize they ain't looking for you anymore, and it's time to get out of here.
Shelters don't usually come ready-made, and there are a lot of variables to finding the right location. In a case like this, I'm literally looking for a spot where otherwise I won't freeze to death. But if there's one thing I've learned about the wilderness, it's that you can't go there with expectations. You can only deal with what you actually find.
Home, I guess. I don't have a lot of options here. You know, in the survival books, they always show some guy in an quick emergency shelter. You can get under the boughs of a spruce tree or something, and there's a little cubby hole. You know, well, I've looked around. This is about as best as I can do for immediate natural shelters. but there is a lot of boughs and stuff. We'll see. I got to get in here and just hopefully make sure I'm protected from most of the wind. That's really important. So get out of that wind. I looked around and saw a couple of other possibilities, but if you sit and watch for a while, you notice a little Spanish moss hanging down. You could see it moving. So you knew there's a breeze working through there. When I sat for a while and looked at this spot here, everything's still. So hopefully I'm in a little protective cove. I just did a big no-no. Put my axe down on the ground. Huge, huge mistake to do that. Do not put your axe on the ground, especially in the winter time, because you'll lose it in a mere second. The benefit of this shelter is it's sort of a natural shelter. All I'm doing is chopping off the tops of trees, little spruce trees here, and filling up a wall in the holes here. Sort of like a makeshift lean-to, I guess. Oh, it's just feeling cozy already. I gotta keep my humor up because I won't be there at 3 a.m. I could get into doing a big elaborate shelter, but I only have probably another hour and a half of daylight. And I know that in making a shelter like that, I'm gonna start sweating. You sweat, you die. So I don't want to sweat.
There are a lot of deprivations I'm willing to put up with in the name of survival. But going without an axe in the middle of a Canadian winter isn't one of them. It changes the possibilities immensely. It can enable a lot more effective survival. But in the hands of someone without skill, one slip and you've just put the axe into your shin, and the odds against you. I'm protecting my eyes by closing them at the last second of the chop. Being blind out here wouldn't be good.
Yeah, this is possibly dangerous. You better know how to wield an axe before you start doing this. Any injury out here is deadly. You don't have to use your axe. Don't. Break things off. You want to save the axe. Keep it sharp. Now, all of that said, I actually did bring a file with me, because I rarely take an axe along without a file strapped to it. Because a dull axe makes you work a lot harder. These boughs are going to be good insulation for the shelter, both underneath me and all around me. Try and make like a cocoon. It's always good to know how many hours you've got left in the day, and a great and easy way to do that is to outstretch your hand towards the sun. And on an average hand, each finger represents about 15 minutes. So if you just touch the bottom of the sun and then count down to the horizon, you get a good approximation of just how many hours are left in the daylight. And that's always important to know. I'm losing my daylight, so I'm gonna light the fire. I have one match, so hopefully I'll have no problems with that one match. What the heck is it? And I've got this big log here, or log, well, this tree anyway, it's a long one. I can feed it in throughout the time so that I don't have to cut it that way. So after I get the fire going, all I'm going to do then is reinforce the shelter a bit and try to get as much firewood here on hand before it's too dark for me to be moving around in the bush. I don't have a lot of time though. Here we go. Last match of the week. Birch bark. Birch bark has got to be the best fire starting material out here.
Anyone who has ever had to survive will attest to the power and beauty and the reassuring sound of the first flames of a fire well built. Without it, survival, any survival, is a horrible struggle.
Don't need this. I have a feeling, even with the fire, with this big wide opening here, it's going to be a long, cold night. Well, it was definitely a cold night. I kept the fire going and I was able to just keep feeding it all night. A lot of shivering, very little sleeping. It's warmed up a bit. It's about minus 17 right now. So it's not so bad. Let's find out what I've got to work with here. First thing, very valuable in survival situation, rope. 1,001 uses. Flare. Well, we're going to try out a flare. Never had a chance to do it before, so we're going to try it out this week and see how that works. Signal mirror. Excellent. Well, take a, it's stuck in there, but take my word for it. Inside there's a small mirror. Can used not only for signaling airplanes, but you can also check your face and see if you've got any white spots in case you've been out in the wind. Make sure you're not getting frostbitten anywhere. Ah, a hot hand. That's got to help me out at night, for sure. Only one, unfortunately, and there's 7 nights to deal with. A whistle, vital. You can go behind a tree in the bush, even in the summertime, especially in the winter. Yell your lungs off. No one can hear you. A whistle helps to cut through the dense forest cover a lot better. Same thing with trying to go across rapids. Very difficult to hear a human voice. Flint striker. Going to get into that later for fire starting. Excellent item to keep with you. You can drop this thing in the water, pick it up a year later, and it still works. Aha! Garbage bag. Not just any ordinary garbage bag, an orange garbage bag. I've got a shelter cover, I've got a raincoat, I've got a signaling light device because orange is going to show up a lot better than dark green. If you can take a garbage bag, make it an orange one. Fishing line, and some lures to go with it. And what's important with these lures as well is that I've purposely chosen winter fishing lures. And that's another thing that's key. When you set up your survival kit, make it something that's conducive to the season you're in. So in this case, something for winter. Now these tracks here are woodland caribou tracks. Unlike its counterpart up in the Arctic, they tend to be a very solitary animal, very difficult to see in the boreal forest, especially in the summertime. But in the wintertime, they will come together in small little communal groups. And the great thing about what you can see here is the difference in time in these tracks. These two tracks here beside me, who knows, maybe a couple of days old or so, but it's been windy for most of the day, and those tracks over there aren't wind blown at all, so we know that an animal has come through here pretty recently. Further on up there, you can see where there's some bit more snow muscled up there, mushed up. What happens is they will often come together in little groups out in the middle of lakes, and who knows what they do, just hang out and talk, but they do tend to come together out there, walk around. This is probably more than one animal, as I see some other tracks around the area here.
I'm taking in as much of the surrounding area as I can to see what I have to work with. It's stage 3 of assessing my situation. Stage 1 is myself. Stage 2 is my gear. And stage 3 is the environment. And this is a tough environment.
This is brutal. This is why you want to stay away from hills as much as possible. This is where the hole in the snowshoe, this is what it's all about. My toes are slipping down into the bottom of or through the hole of my snowshoe, and it's my toes that are gripping the hill to help push me up, which is difficult in this powdery, poofy, slippery snow. Again, that's why I so much prefer using moccasins rather than boots. I can feel the ground with my toes. I can get that little extra grip in there. Not easy though, either way. Well, what have we here? In the summertime, I did a similar survival situation where I came and stayed right here in this location, right in this spot. But let's take a look. And let's hope there's no bears that used it for a den, because it's a perfect size. There's even frozen, as if there was like an air hole coming out here. Make no mistake about it, bears do hibernate. But many hunters know it doesn't take much to wake them up and have them come popping out in the middle of winter, very angry. I suppose it would make a good emergency shelter if I had to get in there. A little rock and everything is there, but it took me a long time to dig this snow out. Even though it's covered over and everything, the way the winds blow and whip around here, they've just blown snow in there. There's at least almost 1.5 feet or 2 feet of snow in the shelter, reaching all the way in. So take me a bit of work. But as I said, this is definitely not the ideal location anyway. It'd be freezing with that north wind. Even in the wintertime, you've got grass just sticking up out of the snow. If the snow's not too deep sometimes, it's almost always nice and dry. I love it for getting a fire going. It gets a lot tougher to get a fire going in the wintertime. I know in the summer, I love the option of having a really big fire and dropping big logs, even punky logs on it, because they'll burn all through the night. In the wintertime, all your punky logs are buried and frozen to the ground and buried by the snow. So you're left to whatever you can sort of grab and break. Anything small and dead like this off the bottoms of trees help a lot, but certainly the bigger fire I can get going, the better I'll feel. You know, when I was first dropped off by the airplane, I could have swore that towards where the sun is right now was due east. I was sure of it. Turns out, it's actually due south. Now, how did I find this out without a compass? Pretty simple. My watch. It's not that difficult. If you take your watch, you point your hour hand directly at the sun, halfway between your hour hand and 12 noon on the face of your watch will be south. And of course, the opposite's going to be directly north.
Having a firm grasp on where north and south are can be very helpful. For everything from where to put your shelter, to where to ice fish, to which location help should be coming from.
That's the one I wanted. Well, I've been spending the day just adding to this shelter. As much as possible, I need to close it all in. Tonight, I'm still in the same scenario I was in last night, where I've got to sit here and by a bigger outdoor fire. The best thing to do is to create like a cocoon that you can get right inside. So even if you didn't have a fire, at least there's some residual heat in there from you. But if you can have a fire that's also protected and inside your shelter, way better, especially in the winter. So I've just been weaving these branches into my shelter to keep me warm and to keep me up off the ground. Right now, there's quite a whiteout happening on the lake. So you know what that means? It means that satellite phone, GPS, two-way radio, none of these things will do me any good at this very moment with a whiteout like that. Nobody can fly in that, nobody can land here to help me out.
Even today, with all of our technology, I can be stuck and completely out of touch in the remote wilderness, where problems like an appendicitis attack could kill me.
Time to make fire again. This time, I'm going to use basically the traditional pioneer method. They didn't have their packs of matches or lighters to carry around. What they did have was steel, something with a high element, high carbon element, and rock. And let's not get into what different kinds of rocks you can spark with. If you're lost, just find a rock that'll spark. If you happen to be lucky enough to have some steel with a high carbon element in it. Ow, haven't done this in a while. Last thing you need is a way, what's happening here is you're coming down and shaving off tiny little slivers of metal and they're shooting away, melted, and they need something to land on. So what you need is something to catch that little spark and then hold a glow. What I've got here is charred cloth. Basically, you take 100% cotton, and, whoops, don't get it in the snow, and you put it in a tin, close the lid of the tin, put it in the fire. So you've chicken before the egg. You got to have a fire to make this stuff. And I'll show it later, but you'll pull the tin out and open it up after a while, and you've got this charred cloth. The point is it's charred, not burnt. So you try to get the spark to land on it. Oh boy, not a good start. Oh boy, it's lots of good sparks, but the cloth isn't holding it. That's not a good sign. Remember Jeremiah Johnson? Robert Redford sat there in the bush trying to get a fire going. This is exactly the method he was using. Got her. All right. What I've got now is this piece of charred cloth is just holding a little ember, a little glow. I think you might be able to see that. That gives me some time to put it in my tinder bundle, which is this collection of dried grass and Spanish moss, cedar bark that's been all schmucked up there, sort of broken up in that. And try to make yourself a little furnace here. Whew, close. Make sure you got all your other tinder ready. And of course, birch bark is a perfect tinder, full of oils. Even when it's soaking wet, it'll burn well. Oh. And you're in business. Now, why should you bother carrying a piece of rock and steel, you might ask? Well, true enough, I'd much rather carry matches and a lighter. But the point is, what if you only have a few matches left? Or you run out of fluid in your lighter? All you have to do is figure out a way to make your charred cloth. If you don't have 100% cotton, which is what it takes, so you can use the bark from a punky tree. You can make charred cloth. If you found a way to get a spark like that, you can extend the life of your lighter and your matches and not even have to use them. And that may matter a great deal if all you have is a handful, 3 or 4 matches on your person. Whew. Well, welcome to my chalet. Well, I made it through another night. Obviously, I must have got enough sleep for my fire to die. is that ever vital. One thing that should be part of your plans for surviving is getting sleep, getting rest. If you get to the point where you're slipping into exhaustion, fighting hypothermia becomes extremely difficult. Even if all you get is 20 minutes at a time, which is about maybe 15, which is about what I got last night, that's fine. At least you're getting some sleep. You need that rest to be able to think clearly.
The irony of the North is that you can freeze to death on a clear and beautiful sunny day.
Well, these are fresh marten tracks. How fresh? Well, he's behind me in the bush. That's how fresh. Didn't seem to want to poke his head out to be filmed, but I watched him run up here just now as I came along. I've been walking the shore, going into different areas trying to find rabbit tracks, and that bush is so thick. Everything sounds so easy in a book, you know. Find yourself some rabbit tracks and set your snares and blah blah blah. Yeah, right. Then you get out here and you try to walk 30 feet and you're already starting to sweat. But the best bonus I've got from walking the shoreline is finding different patches of grass and cedar trees for my tinder. That's been great, but very few animal signs. Caribou tracks, and now these marten tracks.
Unfortunately, tracks alone don't make a meal.
I've been walking for 2 hours along the shoreline. It's very cold wind when it hits up, and spending a lot of calories, a lot of energy. I'm a bit sweaty, so I got to be careful. And all I've seen is one marten, not a single animal track. I poked my head in a few places, nothing. And the other mistake I made was, and bear in mind, I actually looked at a map this time before I came out here. I thought where I'm sitting was the outflow of a major river. Well, it ain't. I was wrong. It was a long walk to find out that I was wrong. Just to get some running water. Now I gotta head back before it gets too late and add to my shelter some more, get that fire going, stock up my firewood for the night. Don't forget, when you go to stock up firewood in a survival situation, plan on needing close to 5 times more than what you think you need. Make a pile, look at it and say, okay, I need 5 more times the wood than what I have here right now. And you'll have enough to get you through the morning, through to the morning. I think I'll just let the sweat dry a bit and warm up in the sun. Know how your lips get all frozen? You can't really speak. Oh.
When I'm alone in a survival situation, I don't take chances. I've got to keep dry and watch my energy level constantly. In this cold, you can burn up to 6,000 calories a day just walking.
Fortunately for me, there was a big windstorm here back in the fall after one heavy snow. There's an awful lot of trees that are laying horizontal. It makes it absolutely brutal for walking through the bush. Just brutal. My lips are still frozen. Gee. But it does help me out in that it puts a lot of the tops of these spruce trees down low to the ground. Lots of good boughs for me to collect. Well, I got my Christmas tree. I just need some presents now.
It's time to break out my flint striker. And truth be told, once you get good at using this little device, it's nearly as easy as matches, and often even more reliable.
There we go. See, I'm ready with my tinder. If you're not, you're cooked, so to speak. Or rather, you're not cooked. You want to have all your tinder bundle ready to go. Whew. Now, another thing that's important. Actually, before I get to that, I'll just mention that I'm going to now maybe put some logs over, but I'm going to fortify this shelter a bit more, maybe so I can enclose my fire in a bit. I don't have to keep it so big all the time, and I'll be able to get more of the heat from it into my shelter. Well, it's end of day 3, and oh man, it's cold. If the full moon brings with it clear skies, then it's going to be very bitterly cold tonight too. I hope not. I have 2 cameras with me, a large one and a smaller one. Big one's just frozen up. It just takes a long time to heat it by the fire. So I'm reduced now down to 1 small camera. I was able to stay warm last night. Well, let's just say I was able to stay alive last night just by mostly feeding the fire and sitting by the fire. The full moon helped me to be able to see the trees around me. I stocked myself up good with firewood before the night fell. But I also used another trick involving these guys, which, thanks for the axe, helped me to have access to. I can't believe how cold it's getting. Minus 37 was just brutal last night. So other than getting up and jumping around and stomping on my feet to keep me warm, another way I was able to keep myself a little bit warmer, help me get me through the night, were these guys, hot rocks. Basically, you get them by the fire, usually about a dozen. You'll need about a dozen to do this. Well, or as many as you can get, I suppose. You warm them up by the fire. Now, you don't want to get them red hot, of course, and burn yourself, but you do want to just warm them up enough, and then the hot rocks store the heat, and then they let all the heat go off again. So I have a few in the fire, warming up. I'd pull them out and I'd tuck them in around me, back inside the shelter. Put some down by my feet, up in the lower part of my back and around my chest. And as those ones cooled down, I'd put them back in the fire and pull out the new batch. And it's a neat little survival trick to know. It's hard to find, if you're losing me in the smoke. Yeah, sorry about that. It's hard to find rocks in the wintertime for sure. But overturned trees often will have them exposed on their root system. And I found these down by the side of the lake. And well, it's working so far. But my goodness, the nights are brutal. Just brutal. I'm just making myself some spruce needle tea. Pine needles, spruce needles, cedar boughs. Well, they call it a bush tea, but it actually has kept people alive. It kept them from scurvy in the past and throughout history. And the explorers, they're loaded with vitamin C. Some people have died of scurvy. Meanwhile, they were sleeping on cedar boughs and spruce boughs at night and didn't realize that they could have made tea out of it and gotten the vitamin C that they needed. It's tastes not too bad and mostly gives me a nice warm drink to sip on. Help keep my body warm and a little bit of nourishment, because this 1 energy bar per day thing is not feeding my strength at all. It's taking mostly everything I've got just to stay warm. You know, you always hear about stamping out help or SOS, and sure enough, those will work if you stamp them out in the snow. But it's a lot less effort just to simply stamp out a triangle, which is a sign for help, international distress signal. And then stick some trees on the 3 corners and turn those trees eventually into your signal fires. Gotta keep moving. Gotta keep moving. That's what they say in the north. Well, my 3 signal towers are up. Next thing is to get lots of birch bark, dried grass, whatever I can find that'll burn quickly, and to shove it inside and reinforce those a bit so I make sure that they don't fall down in the wind or anything. And I just realized after tromping around out here and setting all this up that I've been out here the whole time without my ice grips on in case I fall through. Very foolish indeed. Maybe I need some food and more sleep.
The small rations I had in the beginning of the week are nearly gone, so the lack of food combined with very little sleep is beginning to take away my ability to think clearly, and I'm losing my motivation to even better my situation.
Well, end of another day. It was good to get my signal stamped out in that triangle. I've heard it suggested to do X's, of course SOS, help, whatever, but the triangle is the easiest to do and the quickest, I think. It's good to get that done, and the importance of layering my clothing really counted today. I didn't overheat at all. I could take off and put on as I needed to. And it's just, that's 40 below. What else do you need to know? Well, I'm about 100 kilometers from the nearest soul out here. One thing about the winter, at least, is that traveling can be easier. Forget about it going through the thick bush, unless you've got snowshoes. But at least you can get out on the lake and move around. I know when I've done summer survival simulations, you can be trapped in one little location, unable to get past swamps, unable to get past the lake. At least in the winter, you've got a little bit more mobility, even if it is freezing.
Even putting a contact lens in out here is a challenge.
You probably can't hear that, but there's a big jet going right over top of me. Don't even bother. They're 30,000 feet up, and they can't see the biggest signal you can make. Some cedar boughs to add to my bush tea. You know, wild edible plants in the summer is a great thing, but it's another story in the wintertime. I've been looking around for Labrador tea to, my lips are still frozen, to add to my bush tea. I haven't seen any anywhere. Rock tripe is another, that's that black curly stuff that you see on rocks on the sides of lakes and rivers usually. That can also be boiled up and softened and eaten. It's a little hard on the system, but it does have starch and some nutrients in it. If I remember correctly, it's what Franklin survived on. Rock tripe. Tripe de roche.
In a situation like this, just a small amount of pleasantries, a hot drink, can lift the spirits immensely and make surviving possible.
You know, I have an extra disadvantage in being out here. My fingers freeze really easily, and when I try to work on this stuff, which is touching the cold bare metal, they're frozen very quickly. It's very scary because at times your fingers can numb up so badly and be in so much pain you just can't move until you can get them warm.
It's time to put my axe to good use and see if I can get through the thick ice. Maybe get a chance at catching a fish and getting back some good food energy.
You want to make sure that you hold on to your axe too. Worst thing is you go through just in the last second, you can shoot your axe right down into the hole and I'll never see it again.
You can just imagine how much energy this requires. It's a tough job when all I've got in my stomach is spruce needle tea.
You can see as soon as I chop it out, the water keeps seeping in from the side. It's a race against each other here, between me and the water coming in. This ice could be only 1.5 feet, well, 2 feet thick, because I'm down about 1.5 feet, almost 2 feet now. Or it could be 5 feet thick, which it gets to up here. And if it's 5 feet thick, axe or no axe, I'm not catching any fish, because I'll never get through it.
The obvious danger here is getting my clothes wet. Once I'm done the job, I'll need to stand by the fire for a few hours to dry out before night falls.
Success! Now the water's shot up like that, I know I'm through. So I just got to make sure I got a hole big enough to get a fish through. And if I don't, I'll have to get a pole and try and make sure the hole's big enough to pull up a fish.
Probably one of the tougher disciplines out here is to not use up all my resources or wreck my supplies by breaking and burning them.
I've been making use of my coma tick here by just helping to cover up the shelter a bit, and then I pull my fire in closer to me, and I just keep a nice small fire, and it's helping me to stay warm at night and beat some of this brutal cold. The other thing I'm doing is I take the sled bag that's attached to the other side of it off, and I wrap it around myself and over top of myself, try and keep a little bit more body heat in. Anything you can use for shelter and warmth is fair game in the survival world. Well, one thing you can do if you want to keep your hole from freezing overnight is get a big pile of, just push all kinds of snow over top. 6 feet long and 3 feet high is not overdoing it at all. You want to try and keep it from freezing up. You have to go all through the chopping all over again. Now in my case, I've got the axe though, so I know at least with an axe, it's only going to freeze a little bit, it's not a big deal. More when you don't have an axe that I get worried about it. But
this is when fishing is all about luck.
maybe I need a new lure.
A whiteout has come in this morning, and this was supposed to be the day I get picked up. If the weather doesn't break, I'll be stuck out here for another night. And that wasn't in my plans.
You can't fight weather. If it's a whiteout, it's a whiteout. Planes are grounded, so are helicopters.
Through a small window of opportunity, when the snow backed off just a little, they came looking for me. They knew where they dropped me down, but they'd have no idea as to where I might have gone. The signal sticks out like a beacon against the stark white backdrop of the frozen lake. Running between them is tough. It's still well below zero, and even with a burning piece of birch bark in my hands, my fingers freeze while I run. flare shows up well, but it's short-lived, so on its own, there may only be a small chance at getting someone's attention. If any of this looked easy, guess again. I'm always asked, which is tougher, the cold or the heat? And after a week of dehydration and sunburnt skin, parched landscapes and oppressive heat, I'm inclined to say it's the deserts. They're the toughest. But then I step back onto the snow. I feel the chill up my spine at 3 a.m. in the middle of a long winter night. I feel the sting of frostbite as it threatens to take away the use of my fingers. And I feel the exhaustion as I keep myself moving constantly in a battle to survive. And I think, no, it's not the heat. It's the cold. It's always the cold.